Nico House, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Very good to see you, bro. Thanks for joining us. Let me ask you a question I asked Danny Haiphong. I saw Joe Biden so many times and I cringe, but I saw Nancy Pelosi this week and she makes Joe Biden look like Cicero, look like Aristotle. How did America come to be led by two such people?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think we have to. Well, first of all, thank you for the wonderful introduction. You're too kind. I've been a big fan of the show for a while, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks.
But I think that we have to come to grips in the United States and accept the fact that our democracy is not in the hands of the people, but instead in the hands of the oligarchy. I'm one of those people who preaches when everybody was saying, well, Joe Biden won legitimately or Donald Trump got cheated or whatever. I could care less about either of those things. My issue with our democracy or, lack thereof is that we will never know.
Before I was rudely interrupted, I was talking to ace broadcaster in America, Nico House. It turns out that there was a network disruption, whether a natural occurrence or something else. I'll leave you to ponder. Nico, I just got from you that whether Biden was the legitimate winner or Trump was robbed, you don't really care. The real problem for American democracy is that we'll never know. And that was, I think, a very profound observation. Develop it, please.
Yeah, we'll never know, right? You have to, we have some proprietary software that the average person, even government officials, can't just get access to automatically to verify audits. You have a situation like in South Florida with Tim Canova when he was up running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, where she literally destroyed ballots after being subpoenaed by a federal judge with really no type of penalty to go to her or Brenda Snipes, really, after she was the one who was found guilty of it. Like, how can we be certain that those people in such high-level positions are actually representative of what we're doing? And when they're not representative of what we're doing, it's because we can't vote them out or vote them in with any type of certainty or confidence, which means they can't be held accountable. And when you can't be held accountable, that's how you end up with situations like right now with the Ukraine-Russia scandal, where the U.S. seems to be seems to be involved, not only obviously now, but from 2014 at least. And if you really want to go deep, we can talk about during World War II, how long the United States has been involved in caping for Nazis in the Ukraine. So when you can't be held accountable, you can do stuff like this comfortably and not worried about any retaliation from the public.
I think that's a brilliant observation and one worth everyone reflecting on. But here's another one. In a way, it doesn't matter because they're both two cheeks of the same ass. The Democrats and the Republicans, you couldn't slip sixpence between them, certainly on foreign policy and increasingly on domestic policy also. It really is two sides of the same coin, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Domestic policy. I mean, for all intents and purposes, George, I'm not sure if you know, but we actually got more money in aid during the pandemic from the Trump administration than we've even had offered to us by the Democrats. And the little bit that was offered to us by the Democrats, they actually took back in tax returns. So we really can't tell the difference. And it's actually getting to such a degree that the Democrats are in direct opposition to liberty on all fronts. And of course, Republicans pretend like they're all about liberty as well. But that's really like, I don't really believe you guys either, because you still got your Marco Rubios, you still got your Ted Cruzes, and they sound just as bad as the Joe Bidens or the Nancy Pelosi's. But I will say the only good thing that's coming out of all of this is that there are leftists and conservatives on both sides. A lot of them are referred to themselves as populists on either side that are coming together and coalescing on the important issues such as foreign policy, such as me personally, I'm anti-mandate. It affected the Black community specifically in ways that didn't make any sense, nor seem necessary. But those important humanistic issues we're coming together on, and you're starting to see the narrative shift, which in my opinion has to be the primary focus before we can start worrying about the politics of it all.
I agree with that. Labour, Conservative, Democrat, Republican. What we need is a Liberty Alliance that will try to recover the liberties that have been stolen from us. Try to defend free speech against governments and big tech. Because without these two things, we actually don't have a democracy. You think about it, if you don't have free speech, you don't have democracy, literally. And we are now in an era where free speech is not just under attack, it is virtually being murdered in plain sight. Julian Assange, yesterday, lost his appeal against the extradition order to disappear in a dungeon for 175 years in the United States. You and I and one or two others are about the only big figures left standing on the internet. People are being eliminated ruthlessly, one by one by one.
Yeah. Oh man, we saw what happened with RT America. You know, RT, he is still like producing shows and all that good stuff, but obviously nowhere near the impact that they would have and by the way, they never actually cite what RT actually is lied about. They always claim it's Russian propaganda, but as you know full and well, we have conservatives and leftists all over RT and RT America and the subsidiaries. There's parody on every single show. Even if you don't like what you hear. I mean, on RT, I might hear a liberal say something I do not like, just like I might hear a conservative say something I do not like. But that discourse is important for us to get down and really figure out what the problems are so we can offer valid solutions. But when you're able to attack an entire network to the point where one subsidiary is forced to close entirely, and you don't even have to provide any iota of proof of a single lie, then you're trudging into dangerous territory. And you cannot have liberty without free speech. Let's look at this Russia-Ukraine issue. If you even bring up the fact that the Azov battalion was rewarded, which is a Nazi regiment, a Nazi battalion, it was initially a militia, it was rewarded for helping the United States successfully overthrow the Ukrainian government by being rolled into the official Ukrainian government. If you bring that up and people will tell you, oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, that's Russian propaganda. It was well documented. It's been talked about for years. We've been funding Nazism for years. But that story is harder to tell now because of all the subsidiaries that got taken down, people like you or me who are being either shadow banned from social media, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, whatever, and then people, organizations like RT being taken down, not for lying, because they never point out a lie. They never, as far as straight reporting is concerned, and you will never be able to point a lie from RT. But what you will be able to find are a lot of honest journalists who got tired of being demanded to lie for mainstream media organizations that they may have used to work at. That's what you will find a lot of.
Of course, it would be something if you were not allowed to be a liar on television. If that were the case, then everyone from Rachel Maddow to most of the Fox News hosts and all the others, CNN in its totality, would be off the air because Trump was right about some things. Even a stop clock is right twice a day. But when Trump said these people were fake news, he was right about that.
He was right. Yeah, he was right. And it's funny because so here in the States, Trump co-opted that term because we were saying that about the liberal media and really Fox News at the time in the Bernie camp at the time, because they were always lying about Bernie Sanders for obvious reasons at the time. But no, you're 100% right. And it's funny to me because I'm old enough to remember, George, that if you went on YouTube and even if you said the word Nazi, let alone tried to praise them or carry water for them, you would have been removed immediately. But now you have people going on Rachel Maddow, literally trying to carry water for Hitler, saying, Hitler wasn't even as bad as Putin is, based on lies. And if Rachel Maddow, if that was your George, I think you would agree, we would be canceled. Our shows would be removed. We would be banned.
Exactly.
But Rachel Maddow would still be collecting a paycheck.
They said on Maddow and then tweeted it, now deleted, that Hitler didn't use chemical weapons, which means that 6 million ethnic Germans, meaning German Jews were not Germans, which is what Hitler said, of course. And B, it means that 6 million people were not gassed with chemical weapons. Chemical weapons. That's what Rachel Maddow said, or McFall said on her show. And then she tweeted it. without attribution, i.e. assuming ownership of her. She's not been taken off the air.
Somebody sat down in the production meeting and was like, yup, that's the clip. Let's go ahead and put it on social media. They went back, looked at it and said, this is what we need to post. That's ridiculous. Somebody needs to be held accountable, but they won't be, right? Because they get paid to lie. They get paid to smear. And that's, and like you said, there are only a few of us standing, because where they may not take you off explicitly, they'll just demonetize you. They'll shadow ban you. They'll make it almost impossible for you to grow a business independently, because they saw that, I would say, you know, maybe the rise of Trump in some instances, the rise of the Bernie Sanders movement, Tulsi Gabbard coming onto the scene, Hillary Clinton getting exposed, Biden being exposed. A lot of this stuff is because of independent journalists like you and I, who are dedicated to nothing but the truth. And wherever that truth may fall, like I congratulated Trump and said he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize for what he did with North and South Korea. That had never been done, nor did we think it would happen in our lifetimes. And yet he was able to put his pride to the side and get that done. Whereas in the reverse, you had Hillary Clinton about to start World War III with North Korea, right? That's something that they don't like, is honesty, regardless of where that honesty and truth takes you. And as long as we keep allowing that as a population, not only over the pond where you're at, but here in the States, we're going to still see them try to normalize Nazis and pretend like it's not happening. Pretend as if they care about they call, you know, white, Christian, blue-eyed, blonde-haired refugees from Ukraine. Those are political refugees. But if they're Mexican, if they're Honduran, if they're Somalian or African, well, those are illegals. As long as we keep allowing that binary thought process, that false paradigm of thinking and the suppression of speech, we're going to keep finding ourselves back in this exact same position.
Brilliantly put. Now, you mentioned Tulsi. I thought that she was outstanding for a time during the Russiagate affair. Then she dropped off my radar anyway. But now she's back, and she's being accused by Mitt Romney of being a traitor, literally guilty of treason. Tell the viewers about that, will you?
I find it funny because all she's done is say we should be striving for peace. And she's giving context to the situation between Russia and Ukraine that's very necessary. But also, I remember a time where several Democrats and FBI agents, not named perhaps Andrew McCabe and James Comey and some others, colluded to frame the president of the United States for treason, which, last I checked, in and of itself is treason. They, like, even
yes.
with the impeachment situation, they lied about what President Trump at the time had done, claiming that he was the one who had threatened Zelensky to withhold aid and said that he was bullying Zelensky, when there's a video of Joe Biden at the CFR bragging about doing that very thing and then denying it when he gets on the debate stage, or claiming, oh, they're just claiming that because I'm their opponent, I'm his opponent, right? We've seen literal treason for 4 years. And for Mitt Romney or anyone else to look at Tulsi and say, I'm advocating, because she's saying I'm advocating for peace, therefore she is treasonous, that is absolutely absurd. I'm not surprised, because that's how they try to paint all of us, right, George? I mean, if you try to tell the truth, then you must be a propagandist, right? So I'm not surprised. But for them to do this to a veteran who is currently still in the military, who had a top secret clearance while she was in Congress, who's clear, I mean, you have to go through it's a hellacious process to get top secret clearance, okay? I would know because I used to have one. And for her to go through all that, and for them to have put in no service to this country, to look at someone who has and is very prideful about that service and claim that a colonel in the military is a traitor, you need to resign. And I 100% agree with Tulsi Gabbard on that front. Mitt Romney needs to apologize and resign. And if he does not provide any proof of what he is claiming, then I think she should sue him for slander.
Me too. It's harder in the US to do that than it is in some countries, of course. But I would have thought it was an open and shut case, and one that the crowd would be happy to fund, because this question of demonization, criminalization of independent minds and dissidents, this is what we are now. You know, you're not old enough to remember, but a dissident was a thing in the Soviet Union, in the Eastern Bloc. We all used to love dissidents here. in the West. Now we've become the dissidents. We're the ones that are being suppressed.
Do you remember the Ice Cube situation, George, where Ice Cube came out and said that he wasn't going to support either party because neither of them actually seemed to actually support Black people? You remember how he was being attacked maliciously, lied upon, everything under the sun because he wouldn't support either party. So they said that he was a Trump supporter. Lil Wayne, another rapper, very popular guy, came out and explicitly supported Trump. Probably Lil Wayne, for all intents and purposes, is more popular than Ice Cube is. But guess what? He chose a side. So the attacks on Lil Wayne were few and far between and lasted for like 4 hours because Ice Cube was independent minded. And of course, a Black man being independent minded, saying that the Black people should not trust either party until they show a concrete plan for how they're going to help us. He was attacked for days up until the election. And now, of course, he's been proven right. But that just goes to prove your point. It's the independent minded that they don't like. If you choose a side, well, they can always, the theater encourages you to choose a side. You can work with that. But those who are willing to call out both sides and also give credit where credit is due, those tend to be seen as the most dangerous.
Lastly, Nico, and I'm grateful for your time, and speaking of dangerous rhetoric, just in the last 10 minutes, Joe Biden has described Vladimir Putin as a war criminal. That is one president calling another president a war criminal. And the Russian response is that this is unforgivable rhetoric. And one thing I know about Russians is when they say something, they mean it. When they say something is a red line, it is a red line. When they say that something is unforgivable, it will not be forgiven. So this means we're now locked into, not just for the course, the duration of these hostilities, which I pray will be mercifully short, but we are now locked into, as long as Biden and Putin are alive and in office, a virtual state of war between Russia and the United States, even if it hasn't come to direct shooting yet.
At the very least, a new Cold War.
Very, very, very dangerous moment, isn't it?
Yeah, at the very least, a new Cold War, which actually Tulsi had been trying to warn about her entire campaign, ironically enough, right? Something I've been warning about. But the audacity, the living, unmitigated audacity for Joe Biden to call anybody a war criminal when we literally droned innocent civilians in Afghanistan not even months ago and admitted to it. We've been bombing Somalia on and off for the last year, and we don't even know the real reason why we've been doing so. That's not just us. That's all of NATO. All of the major NATO powers have been involved in this. We've been funding literal Nazis, not just this year, but at least since 2014, bare minimum, okay? We killed more innocent people in Afghanistan than the terror, like us in the Afghan army that we were training, than the actual terrorists did. And we also obviously killed more innocent people than we actually killed terrorists while we were there, right? There is, to compare Putin, I don't know Putin personally. I don't know if he's a good or a bad guy. I can only compare policy to policy because these are the two countries that are going at it. Putin was invited to Syria to help reconcile the situation with the terrorists, the ISIS terrorists that we put there. Every time we go back, ISIS shows up. Every time Putin shows up and him and Assad work together, ISIS is gone. Speaking from a Black perspective, Russia and Putin were not responsible for the deaths of multiple Black liberators. Putin isn't running Guantanamo Bay right now, okay? Putin doesn't have, 700 bases in over 80 countries around the world? Putin isn't responsible for invading Vietnam. He isn't responsible for balkanizing Korea. He isn't responsible for, he really is. It's the list of egregious offensive. He isn't responsible for siege warfare against Venezuela or Cuba, or responsible for overthrowing a government in Bolivia. The list goes on and on and on. But the moment that he decides to defend his country, we call him a war criminal because that's right out of the regime change playbook. We did the same thing right to Gaddafi right before we assassinated him. We tried to do the same thing to Assad. We did the same thing to Maduro. We always claim when a country has to defend itself against NATO powers, when they do defend themselves, that they are war criminals for doing so. Meanwhile, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, looks a lot like the criminal justice system in the US. The people who should be being prosecuted, like Biden, Hillary, even Trump to some degree with the assassination of Soleimani and other things, they're not the ones being prosecuted. The ICC is just a bunch of black people and brown people who are getting thrown under the bus by the United States, who are being tried instead, so that the real criminals never really get held accountable.
Nico House, you're a star. Thanks for shining on us tonight on the Mother of All talk shows.